All right. So, did anybody figure out what we're up to? I give you plenty of time.
I have 171.
All right. Yeah, Doc, you're out.
I'm out.
No, Dr. Krako, you're way out. Anybody else?
162.
162. Oh boy, really far back. Okay. Okay. So we are in chapter 8. We are in the paragraph that starts with Vihine, not the first Vihine, but the second Vihine. I don't know what. I don't know where that is again. 172.
In 1 year, we get through
What?
In 1 year, we've gotten to 4,000.
Has it been a year?
So my notes in this notebook anyway started on.
No, it's got to be more than a year. We're up to class 65.
Huh?
We're up to class number 65.
No, I'm saying in my notes.
Oh, your notes
My
have been
notes,
for 1 year.
Like I have
Got
the
it.
first thing I have written in these notes is chapter 4, and that was a year ago.
Got it.
Like 1/1/22.
Okay,
So
good to know. Faster than Bereshis.
I mean,
Are we up to
everything's faster than Bereshit.
Yeah,
Bereshit, you've been working on it for like 14 years now. I feel like.
almost. Getting there. All right, so we're not in Gimel. It's still in Aleph. We're in Parak Ches Aleph. The second paragraph of Vihine. Got that? Anybody? Top of 170, 171. Okay. All right, here we go. So, what we've said so far in this chapter has been that Hashem has different aspects of His running the world. And what we've said is that everything works through two main channels. And those are Mishpat, justice, and Rachamim, mercy. And those two are the two that make up all of Hashem's runnings of the world. They work through, I don't want to say one or the other, because as he has said himself, it's always both, but it looks like one or the other, and it's primarily one or the other. So, he brought a number of verses that all discuss that Hashem runs the world through justice, and that Hashem's justice is complete, and it is the ultimate of justice. And at the same time, Hashem loves His creations and wants to do good for them. So the thing is that when you truly love someone, there are times that you need to discipline them in order for it to be good for them in the long run. And anyone who's ever tried raising a child, successfully or otherwise, is aware that this is common. It's something that needs to be done. As many verses state, it is important for a parent to raise a child, and that doesn't mean always giving them what is good right now, but always giving them what will be good in the bottom line at the end game. So, as he brings the pasuk, Ki kasher yeyaser ishes b'nai Hashem lekechem yasraka. The same way a father will discipline his son for the purpose of raising this child, so that they will have a better life in the long run, so too Hashem will discipline us when He deems it necessary. Now, the fact that it's being done as a father to a child carries with it a couple of ramifications, which he mentioned. He said, firstly, it's not nearly as harsh as it would be if it were, say, a judge who is exacting punishment on a criminal. Obviously, that would be more harsh than a father to a son. That's the first. And the second is that the love itself could be so strong that there will be times that Hashem will entirely circumvent the justice side and just work within the mercy department. Which again, that's only something that's possible if you're dealing with a parent-child relationship. That's not the kind of thing that will work with a judge and judge relationship. So we mentioned that this needs a lot of explanation. And we said that in Das Tunas, Ramchal himself explains that this happens, meaning this idea of circumventing justice and working with mercy, this happens when we wouldn't be able to handle what the justice would demand. And built into the justice system is that we need to survive, and Hashem's plan needs to be fulfilled, and therefore there will be ways, loopholes, legal loopholes, so to speak, that will allow for the justice to be set aside. And one of the examples he gives, which is something we will discuss later on, we should all live and be well until we get there. I don't know how long that's going to take. But for example, he says that there are certain mitzvahs that are able to, what's the word he uses here? To neutralize a consequence from a sin. So the mitzvah of shofar, for example, is very powerful in its ability to neutralize sins for the punishments that we should be getting. Mitzvahs have the ability to counteract those. Now, this is a rare thing. It's not a normal thing. Most of the time when it comes to the judgment system, there's no counteracting. There's no, you did something good, you did something bad, so they will just cancel them out. Typically, it doesn't work that way. But certain mitzvahs have a certain power to them that they're able to override consequences that would have otherwise been coming to a person. And until I see this part of Ramchal inside, I'm going to assume that this is limited to the way Hashem runs this world. Meaning, this is not talking about the way we are judged in the world to come. When it comes to the judgment of the world to come, I don't think there's anything that can cancel anything else out. Everything is absolutely there. I think it's just the way Hashem runs the world in order to allow for the mercy to work, and especially, like we've said, in circumstances where it's not, we wouldn't survive otherwise, then Hashem will use the system. And I don't think that works in the true judgment that takes place in the world to come. But that's just my thought until we see otherwise. So hopefully when we get there, we'll remember this conversation. Okay. So that's really what we covered until now. So, so basically what we're saying is that, and this is just what we need for moving forward, is that every decision that Hashem makes is essentially justice and mercy. They both lead to the same place. And did we read that piece from Rav Dessler about that?
You've read a piece from Rav Dessler.
Here, in this class, right? Okay, yeah. So Rav Dessler explains the way that works is that if you have a judge whose goal is the ultimate, we'll call it the ultimate tshuva of the people who are being judged, and that they should turn out well, so different people are going to be judged differently. You have two people who did the same thing wrong, but one of them is hanging out with the gangs, and the other one is living with a nice family. So to send them both back home is not going to work for both of them. It might work for the one who's got the nice family. It's not going to work for the one who is hanging out in the slums with the gangs, right? So for that one, it's going to take something different than it'll take for the other one. So justice and mercy are both shooting for the same goal. They're both trying to get the person back on track. And when it looks harsh, it's because that's the best way to get the person back on track, and that's what we view as justice. And when it looks nice and comfortable, that's what we view as mercy, but essentially that's what justice wants as well, because that's the best way for the person to get back on track. Okay? Good? Okay. So that's what we covered last class. Okay, so let us continue. Okay, so v'hine. V'yayishen ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'bechiras adam b'masav. Since Hashem wants the choices of people, uv'yayishen mishpat hagemul, and through the straight justice, l'shalem leish k'ma'aseyu, to repay a person, to compensate a person for what they've done. So meaning, Hashem wants the world to run in a way that our actions are going to decide the outcome of those actions. Meaning, if we do something bad, there should be some degree of punishment. If we do something good, there should be some degree of reward. So therefore, Hashem, to a certain degree, will tether his running of the world to the actions of mankind. So the way we work affects the way he works. That nothing good should come to a person, nothing bad should come to a person, only based on his own actions. Okay, so this is a novel concept because typically we don't understand that there is reward and punishment for the things that we do here in this world, and yet Ramchal is saying that Hashem does, to a degree, make his decisions. Excuse me, for how to run this world based on our actions. So he's not saying that we necessarily receive reward based on our actions here in this world, or punishment, but there is some degree of connection between the things Hashem does and the things that we do. Now, he says a very important catch to this. However, obviously Hashem is not tied down to any kind of rules. He doesn't need anyone else. He's not affected by anything. Therefore, when Hashem wants to use his loftiness, meaning when he wants to rise above the system that he set up, so he will do things, and he will act in the way that he wants, without anything forcing him or influencing him or stopping him at all. So what he's saying is that there's a standard system, which is based on the way we act, and then there's a higher system, in which Hashem kind of ignores, so to speak, the way we act, and instead does things the way he wants to do them. Okay, it's a very interesting concept.
But didn't we already learn that what happens down here affects what happens up there? So the based in shel mata, applies to the based in shel malo. So
Yeah.
Hashem set up rewards and punishments, and he does have a system of the way things work. So he just contradicted himself here.
Okay, so what Brad is asking is that Hashem set up a system that we learned about, in which there are judgments made all the time. The world should be run based on those judgments. The answer is that he's saying over here is that while that is generally true, there are exceptions to that. And there are times where Hashem says, forget the judgment, I'm going to do things my way. So they're both true. So the general system is, like we've been learning, there is a court, and there is everything that we say, do, or think is judged, and ramifications are created based on that. But there are times, as he said, in which Hashem will employ his own system of mercy that will override all of that. Okay, now this is similar to what we had mentioned then, that sometimes those courts are run by angels, and sometimes Hashem himself decides. Sometimes Hashem himself decides to judge those cases. So, similar idea. I'm going to get some water. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you need more coffee? Anybody need more?
Let me tell you something. I had 3 cups of coffee before I even got my Starbucks, and I finished it before we even started.
Okay.
I'm not even pouring you any
But I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You're cutting me off, huh?
What you're saying is you want more coffee.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm hearing.
What I'm saying
I
is,
drink that much coffee.
What about you?
I decaf.
Right.
I drink fake coffee. I like the taste of it, but I can't.
That's not fake. It's just
Caffeine does not like get along with me.
no,
It's crazy. You should see me on caffeine.
I don't.
Like crack.
I don't do much caffeine either.
I quit it about 5 years ago. Okay.
All right, knock it off.
I know what he needs to go home and rest.
All right.
What am I giving you today to feel better?
Wouldn't have helped. Okay, so okay, so that's the system. Basically, there's a standard, and then there's the exceptions to that, in which Hashem, as I mentioned earlier, will have times that he will use his loftiness, meaning his oneness, his uniqueness, to override the system. But as we said, even that is still within the realm of justice. Okay. So just interesting to note, he brings here on the bottom that in Das Tunas, another one of the works of Ramchal, he brings verses for all of these ideas. He brings psukim from all different places of Tanakh, which each bring out one of these aspects. So these are not just things that the Ramchal is making up. These are explicit psukim. Okay, so let's continue. Ulam Lanhagas Hamishpat. When it comes to working with the world in the system of justice, Yinhag kefi hashibud shezacharnu. He'll work within the system, the confines of the system that we mentioned earlier, of the judgment, the courts, the whole system that with the witnesses, as we learned about. However, tigzar chachmasai hayais na'is, when Hashem's wisdom decrees that it is appropriate, havara al shur sadin, to have a change from the letter of the law, then Hashem will use his loftiness and his singular sovereignty over the world, v'yavar al pesha, and he will forgive sin. V'yisakin kol kilkul ba'otzim kochai, and Hashem will even correct any damage through his strength. So not only can Hashem at times forgive sins that perhaps by the letter of the law should not be forgiven, Hashem can also correct that which has been wronged. So if a person, for example, was, because of their sin, their neshama had sustained, we'll call it damage, it's not actually damage, but had sustained some staining, Hashem can get rid of that, even though the system of justice would not allow for that. Nevertheless, that can happen. And I'm surprised he doesn't bring it here, but there is one of the Nevi'im, I believe it was Hosea, don't know that for sure, saw a vision in which he was standing before Hashem, and he was wearing soiled clothing. And the Hashem told the angel to change his clothing and remove the soiled clothing and put on clean clothing. And the message there was that even though the sins of Klal Yisrael had created these stains, Hashem can remove it. And that's exactly what happened. Okay. So Nimtzu kan shnei minim hashgacha. There are two kinds of Hashem's running the world that are found. Hashgachas mishpat Hashem Yisbarach, there is the system of justice of Hashem, and then there is the system of Hashem's complete rulership and oneness over the world, meaning mercy. And it is through these ways, through these paths and systems, that Hashem runs the world completely. Now, this line here is a bit, it's a bit vague, but from the commentaries it seems that what Ramchal means here is that both of these systems are always employed. They're both always in use. The simple reading of this would imply that it's one or the other, but the commentaries, all based on other works of Ramchal, understand this to mean that Hashem is constantly using both. It's always both. It's not one or the other, it's always both. Just two different ways of reading this line that we just read, but that's how the commentaries understand it. So, Kihine hu mashgiach b'hashgachas hamishpat, because Hashem oversees everything through the justice system, lishbait tamid eskal hamaisa, to constantly be judging everything that is done, umashgiach b'hashgachas hashlita, and at the same time, he is overlooking the world with the power of his sovereignty, to keep the world sustained in the way it needs to be, and will not be destroyed through the bad deeds of mankind. So, as I mentioned earlier, if there are things that we couldn't handle, then Hashem will, at times, or maybe always, use this oneness, use this higher level of mercy to run the world and work out within the system of justice a way to forgive the sins. So in order for the world to continue on the path that it needs to go on in order to exist, this needs to be there. So at the very beginning of the Torah, the pasuk says, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim es haaretz." In the beginning of creation, Hashem created heaven and earth. Now, the term there for Hashem is Elokim. It doesn't say Hashem. Why? Come on, Harvey, you were there. I'm kidding. I don't think you were there yet. You weren't there at the beginning of time? Yeah. So the reason is because when Hashem initially created the world, he created it with a system of justice. The name Elokim means a judge. And Hashem initially had created the world just with the system of justice, not more. Later on in the Psukim, it then starts incorporating and saying Hashem Elokim, Hashem Elokim, Hashem Elokim in a number of places. And that's because Hashem saw that the world was not going to survive. The world would not be able to exist if there was just a system of justice. And therefore Hashem included and incorporated the system of mercy, which is the name Hashem represents, because it needed to have both of those in order for the existence to continue. And that's exactly what he's saying over here. He says that there has to be the plan of Hashem needs to be fulfilled. The world needs to go on, and sometimes that requires mercy that goes beyond justice. All right, good? Nothing to say? I have to do all the talking? One day I can't talk and I have to do all the talking? Come on, Doc. You've never been this quiet in your life. What's going on? He's driving, I know. All right. Okay, another thing we have to know. That even Hashem's shefa, we learned about shefa, that's the influence that Hashem sends down into the world, the things that happen, that comes down in what's called shefa. This is also split into two. Echad hu l'mashal haguf. One is what is applicable to the body, the physical. V'asheni l'mashal nefesh, and the second is that which applies to the spirit, the soul of man. Now here too, the commentaries that I've seen seem to be understanding that this is connected to the previous statement, meaning to say that when he says here that there are these two systems, there's the shefa of physicality and the shefa of spirituality, those two are connected to the two systems, meaning the system of judgment and the system of mercy. And that the system of judgment works with the physical realm, and the system of mercy works within the spiritual realm. Now, I haven't worked this all out yet. I was seeing this last night, and I don't have clarity with it yet. Maybe we'll get some clarity as we go on. But just to be aware, the commentaries are all, that I've seen so far anyway, are all saying that those two things are connected. So let's take a look. L'mashal aguf, krabayarna inyana. As far as the physical things, the body, that we've already explained. The things that are there for the success of mankind and for the tranquility of mankind in this world. However, the things that are for the soul, this is referring to understanding, knowledge, and coming close to Hashem. And the greatness and the high level of the neshama. So, really, until now, what we've been talking about has always been the physicality. We spoke about how things happen to people, things happen to the world, nations, the entire world, parts of the world, individuals. All those things we've been talking about have always been in the physical realm. We've always been talking about physical things happening. But in addition to that, there's also a system for the spiritual things that happen. So a person's understanding, a person's knowledge of Hashem, a person's coming close to Hashem, understanding the neshama, what it can accomplish, all that, that's all with a whole separate system. So how does this work? So he explains. They really work together. Because the best situation that the world can find itself in be'emes, in truth, that people, as a whole, should be connecting to wisdom, and involved in serving their Creator, and the truth should be revealed and clear, and all wickedness will be run off and gone. Hatarmis mushlach, and all the idea of deceitfulness will be sent away. There will be no other service in the world other than serving Hashem. And all of the good midas, all the good character traits of people will be found, and they will be strong. And the bad midas will be pushed away, and they will be disgusted. People won't even want them. And once that happens, the way the world will react to that will be, the world will be tranquil, the world will be calm. And there will be no hardships, no illness, no damage, nothing that will hurt. And Hashem will rest His presence openly in this world. And Hashem will be happy with His creatures. And His creatures will be happy and rejoice before Him. So that's the ultimate. The ultimate is people are connected to spirituality. People's focus is a spiritual focus. All the problems in the world disappear. Ultimate goal. Okay. However, the opposite of all of this is is when people are constantly trying to fulfill their desires. And then they despise wisdom, and they're far from it. They don't turn to serving Hashem kimat, maybe a little, like klum, or maybe not at all. Emes arza, and truth is sent down to the ground. Harasha gaiver matzliach, the wicked become strong and they are successful. Atarmis, atos, rabba, deceitfulness and mistakes are plentiful, they're common. There's all sorts of services that people are offering in the world. Good midas, those are lacking. But bad midas, those are common and they're everywhere. And when the world is in that kind of state, what does the world itself look like? Hashket chaser, tranquility is missing. Ein shalva, there's no quiet, there's no peace. Yisurin, vanizakim rabim, there's all sorts of problems, all sorts of damage. V'adam baruch hu mastir kavadam elamai, Hashem hides his honor from this world. V'aylam haylech ki'ilu nazav l'mikra, and the world goes as if, not actually, but it's as if, it looks like it's going with just happenstance. U'moshach l'teva, and it's as if it's simply working with the laws of nature. V'enakadosh baruch hu sameach l'masav, Hashem is not rejoicing in his creatures. The ein b'nei ha'adam sameach l'fanav, and the creatures are not rejoicing before him. V'lemakirim v'yodim, and they don't even recognize or know mahi simchas habriyas l'fnei bar, what the idea of the joy of the creatures before Hashem would be. During that time, the evil, those concepts and people, are the ones who become strong, and the and the good ones are the ones who are sent low. So he just made a very, very clear description of the world the way it should be and the world the way it is. And in the world the way it should be, everything's good. And that all starts from when people are focusing on their spiritual pursuits. And the world that it is, the world of bad, with all the things that he just described, that all starts from people focusing on their desires. When people are focusing on what they want, their physical, now physical doesn't mean purely physical, but it means social, it means anything that comes from the ego, anything that comes from the human body, mind, heart, all of that. That's all part of the physical. And that's all, anything that's not within the realm of spiritual is part of physical. So you have people who aren't necessarily looking for the nicest car, but they absolutely are extremely careful about how people treat them. And you have people who don't necessarily buy the fanciest clothing, but if you say a bad word about them, oh, are they going to have it for you, right? So that's all part of physical. The concept of spirituality is that none of that matters. Not the car and not the social standing. Not the clothes and not what people say to you. None of that matters. The only focus is coming close to Hashem. And in that world that everybody is looking and feeling that way, every problem goes away. Because as we've learned, all of the difficulties in life are as a result of the things that we've done wrong, areas that we need to improve in. That's why things happen. So if we're all focusing on spirituality all the time, we won't need that. And we find all those things go away. And unfortunately, this world, the way it is now, is a world in which, as he says, Hashem hides himself from us. So it looks like the world is running with nature. It looks like when you go to work, you bring home a paycheck and you pay your bills. It looks like that's how the system works. But the reality is not that way. But because Hashem has hidden himself, that's how it looks. We see the cause and effect and we think that's what's really going on. When in reality, it doesn't matter at all. Hashem doesn't need you to go to work to get your paycheck. Hashem doesn't need you to make money to pay your bills. Hashem will take care of it. And he does, regardless of what you do. So yes, there's a correlation, as we've learned, between what you do and what Hashem does, but it's not necessary. So if we had a proper vision, we would all see that they're not related. But because we're living in this world that's so full of all the bad stuff, Hashem hides himself, and in our minds, we see cause and effect from our vision. And that's not accurate, but that's the world we live in. We look at things and we think, this is the world of nature, this is the world of science, this is how things work. When you get this virus, this is what happens to you. When you get this vaccine, this is what happens to this virus. When you travel at this speed, this is what, all the things that we look at in the world of science and nature, and we think that's reality. But that's all because we're living in this description of the bad world. If we had proper vision and we were properly focused on spirituality, we would see that none of that matters. None of that makes a difference at all. It has nothing to do with anything. So it's that lack of focus on spirituality that makes us blind, and it makes us hurt, and it makes all the problems that we encounter in life. They all come from the lack of focus on spirituality. Now, it's not necessarily just us. It's the world at large. So if I personally fix everything and I'm perfectly spiritually focused, does that mean all these other things are going to change? Not necessarily. The world has to get to that point, which I think we're still got a little bit of work to do till we get there. But just to understand, these are the two versions of this world that can exist. Okay? This good? Clear? Anybody? No one's got anything to say today.
Rabbi, the only thing that is really confusing me is when you're talking about the base, sort of the standard, being in, and then Hashem using Rachamim for. I mean, just in understanding my own personal life, it's hard to understand how anything can live with din. So even though it's the base standard, wouldn't we assume that everything is done with Rachamim?
Okay. Okay, so what you're asking is that it would seem that in order for people to survive, there would have to be Rachamim always incorporated. And why are we saying that the standard is that it works with din?
Not necessarily why, because we want to aim for that.
How does it work?
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer is that you're right. We would not make it very far if we were just working within the realm of din. But there's a concept within din that there's also Rachamim. And then there's a concept where Rachamim overrides din. We're talking about Rachamim overriding din. The incorporation of Rachamim into din is something we talked about previously. And that's what you're discussing. You're saying that if Hashem was working with absolute, pure, strict justice, nobody would live a day. You're right. But that's within din, Hashem already incorporated Rachamim, that there's leeway. Then there's the next level, that's what we're talking about here, is that even after that, there's still times where we wouldn't survive, even with all of that. And that's when Hashem employs that higher level of Rachamim overriding din entirely.
So is that dilution, so to speak?
The first?
The first dilution.
Yeah.
And the second dilution. Do they have meaning in themselves?
Do they have meaning in themselves? What do you mean?
Yeah. Because they're dilutions. And
I wouldn't call it a delusion. I would call it an incorporation. Mamtik esadena, sweetening the justice, meaning that Hashem incorporates more mercy into the justice system. So the justice system is now less harsh. It works like a parent-child relationship. So
the first one is a parent-child relationship, or the second one? Second dilution. Second.
Both.
Position.
Both. One is the parent-child relationship where din is being exercised, and the second one is the parent-child relationship where din is being overridden.
And they're both parent-child?
Yes. Okay. All right, are we good here? Oh, no, Dr. K's got something to say. Oh, boy. Well, let's hope he doesn't learn how to unmute himself. Go ahead.
Free will. I'm a little confused when you made the example about you could be driving at a certain speed. I mean, I don't understand. You have to have the free will that says drive the speed limit, so to speak, because you think you're safer. But you could also say, no, I feel really energetic today. I'm going to drive 100 miles an hour. I mean, I'm trying to understand what you're saying in that context.
Okay. So I was not saying that. Let's just make it clear here. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying was that we view the world as working with scientific, natural causes and effects. I was not saying that a person can endanger themselves and say, well, if Hashem doesn't want me to die, I won't die. Obviously, you're not allowed to do that. You have to work within the natural world. But we have certain understandings of the way physical things react to different lights, different speeds, different temperatures, and things like that. And we think that that's how the world runs. But the reality is that Hashem runs the world regardless of the natural course that He put into play. So if, for example, somebody was... let me think of a safe example that won't be misconstrued. Let's say somebody was running a business, and the standard for that particular industry is that 80% of the revenue comes in over the weekends. So a person could say, well, Hashem told me I've got to make a living, and therefore I need to be open on Shabbos. Otherwise, I won't have bread to put on the table. But if a person understands that it doesn't work that way, then they'll say, Hashem also told me to keep Shabbos. So He'll figure it out. I don't need to figure it out. Hashem will figure it out. So close on Shabbos, and you'll notice that somehow that revenue that would have naturally come in over Shabbos shows up some other way. So it's not about being irresponsible. It's about doing what Hashem says and not worrying about what you think the outcome of that's going to be. Because you should never concern yourself with the outcome. You need to concern yourself with what Hashem says. So when it comes to driving, stay within the speed limit, please.
Very, very good. Is this where you insert your sleep joke?
I've passed up many an opportunity. You're welcome.
Very good, thank you.
All right. Yes, sleep is a joke. All right, here we go. V'nimtza. I'll just finish up over here, last couple lines. V'nimtza, so it comes out, Shehine, Yushpa mimenu yisbarach shemoi, lema shebechol inyanim hashayachim leguf. Hashem will send down Shefa in one area regarding everything that happens to the body, the physical. B'chalke hamatzah shezacharnu, with all the different areas and arenas that we've discussed. As well as all the different things that are relevant to the nefesh, to the soul of a person. All right, very good. I'll stop here. Hopefully my voice will be back to normal next week, and sooner.
Where exactly are we stopping?
We're at Gimel.
Gimel. Yeah, we're up to Gimel.
Oh, okay, number 3.
Yep.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
173.
How's your voice?
What is going on? All of our voices.
It's called winter.
Yeah, it's just pollen and...
It finally hit us. Got under 50.
Yeah.
All right, have a good one.